Welcome. This afternoon's session is an introduction to Nearpod, and it is being presented to you by the Technology Training Team, also known as T3. Your facilitators in today's session is Ms. Monica Jenkins, Ms. Kimberly Robertson, as well as myself. I am Tia Simmons. Just to give you a quick overview about Nearpod, it is in some matter of speaking, an interactive, educational technology tool. It is available to our teachers in our district, and it gives you a lot of options and a lot of flexibility in terms of making some of the information and content you present to your students a little more interactive and engaging for them, while allowing them to have a little bit of fun in their lessons. And you can also not only provide those opportunities for the engagement, for the interactivity and the fun, but you can also, we'll talk about a little bit later on today, review student progress. So what we're going to do now is we're going to switch gears and give you the opportunity to experience the student side of Nearpod. So in a moment, we are going to put in the chat window the link that you see on the screen. Once you arrive at that link, you will also need to enter a code. The code is case sensitive, and you will need to type that code on the screen where you're joining in. So it looks like we have a large majority here. I can see on my teacher screen, which you'll get a chance to see a little bit later, that I've got about 70 students in already. So we are going to go ahead and proceed forward at this time. This is just kind of a last call for those of you that are still in WebEx. If you want to join us, there is a link in the chat window on how to participate in the student experience. There is a code that's required once you're in, and you will also need to enter that code, and it is case sensitive. For those of you that are in the student experience, you should now be outside of WebEx and back on your web browser, and we're going to proceed forward with the student experience. So just a quick question for you. Have you ever used Nearpod before? So on your screen, you should be able to see the option to say yes or no and select that option. For those of you that are here with me in WebEx, I'm just taking a look at this at the teacher side, which mostly everyone will see a little bit later. Okay. So first question, this is a poll type question in Nearpod. Have you ever used Nearpod before? So we have a large majority of our students, those of you that are participating as a student today, a large majority of you have said no, which is great because you'll learn all about it in today's session. Okay. So now what I want to do is introduce you to a drawing experience that you can use in Nearpod with your students. And I want you to use the pen tools that you see along the bottom of your screen to circle the device most of your students are using at this time. Are most of them using iPads, Chromebooks, or smartphones? Think about your own class, and I want you to use the pen tool you see at the bottom of your screen to indicate which device most of your students are using. And it looks like most of you, it's kind of a tie between, I'm looking at the results on the teacher side, it's kind of a tie between Chromebooks and smartphones. So we know that most of our students who are out there connecting to you all are doing it through one of those devices, okay? Now, here's an opportunity for you to think through and use a little closed reading and engage in what we call a fill in the blank opportunity. So I want you to read the sentence and then drag the squares from the words from the bottom of the screen, drag the words to the specific blanks at the top. And now we're going to participate in one more student activity. And in this case, I want you all to kind of collaborate, right? You've had a chance to look at a few ways that Nearpod can be used. Now I want you to just collaborate and share how can Nearpod allow you to teach your students. And we're going to have this board. It's kind of our working idea board where everyone can give an idea. So just based on what you've seen and not necessarily having to dive in yet to Nearpod completely, how do you think Nearpod can help you teach your students? Once you're done, you're going to type and then click on post. And I see a lot of you sharing some really great ideas. To summarize, interactive, right? So not just give our students work, not just give our students Google Docs, but give them an opportunity to engage and be interactive. Instant feedback, excellent. Lots of interactivity. Virtual instruction, fun. I love that. And I love that you can also see there are multiple ways to respond on this board as well, right? Not just text, but you could also do images. So now at this time, we're going to switch gears and we're going to come back. I'm going to have you navigate back to the WebEx experience just because we're going to go over how to log in and talk about some of the navigation and the things that you will see when you log into your Nearpod account for the first time, so that you can be able to see some of the behind the scenes now. You've seen some activities. We've done a poll. We've done fill in the blanks. We did a collaborate board. And we've also done some of the other type of activities. Oh, fill in the blank. Perfect. So we did those. So now we'll come back and talk about the teacher side of it. So before we dive in and take a look at um, just the whole inner workings, and where do I start from here, Tia? Like, now I have some ideas of content I want to use. Where do I start? I want to show you some of the feedback that I received as the teacher. Okay, I just want to show you some of the things that I saw on my end. So for those of you that were here with me in WebEx, you saw some of it, but as the teacher, I was driving the presentation, right? I had control and I was allowing you as the student to participate in the slides as I was going through at my speed. So as you were filling out the collaborate board, I could see some of what you were showing, what you were entering on the collaborate board, and I saw it real time. So as it was coming in, all of the answers began to filter down on the page. So I could see that on the collaborate board. When we were on the fill in the blank board, I saw the examples here, but I could have toggled through to look at some of the other examples that were shown on the teacher side. This one I would probably look at more in the reports, which we'll talk about later. But on the drawing slide, as you all were picking up your pens and you were drawing on your pens, I could see how you all were drawing and entering the information. I immediately saw, as you all were drawing, some of the things that you were selecting. So as the teacher, I could go by and I can notice that, oh, I see a large majority were saying Chromebooks. Now on some of these, I did place a timer on the activity, and some of them I didn't, because I wanted you to see that I could give you a specific amount of time with which to answer, or I can kind of leave it open-ended and wait for my direction. And then when we were on the first question, which was the poll question, and I asked you, who have you ever entered? I also noticed that the dots came in. And you can see right now that the student names were blanked out, but I could, if I wanted to, in the bottom of my screen, do show student names, so I could see as you all were entering and making your selections, which students made which choices. So there was instant feedback that I received on the teacher side as you all were answering. Okay, so just know that I wasn't just kind of looking and waiting and guessing, but I could see that feedback real time, which when you're doing what Nearpod calls a live lesson could be really important, right? As the teacher, I'm getting that live real-time feedback. As the students, you're entering, and I can actually provide some additional feedback as well. If we're doing a lesson like this, maybe you're using Zoom to do a Nearpod live lesson, I can continue to talk to you audibly and share some feedback as you're going through as a student. Or we'll talk about a little later how you can also do self-paced. And in that case, if you're doing self-paced, the students would be doing it at their own time. And as the teacher, I can come back and look a little bit later. Okay. So as the teacher, I created the lesson. I was looking at the real-time feedback. But let's take a step back now and let's actually talk about how we build the lesson. Where do we go from here? Like, okay, Tia, you're telling me I can make these activities, I can look at real-time feedback, but where do I start? Since most of you said, no, you've never used it before. So we're going to actually switch gears. I'm going to do a virtual tag team high five to my partner, Monica Jenkins, who's here also with us in the session today. She's going to take over the screen and actually walk you through where you start from the beginning.
So thank you for that, Tia. So we had
Monica.
we had a chance to experience Nearpod in the student view, and then Tia was able to show you some of the feedback that she was getting as the teacher during the lesson. Now let's take a moment to jump into Nearpod. And when I say jump in, I'll be going in as that teacher view. You're going to stay here in WebEx so that you can watch and see the back end of how it looks on the teacher side for Nearpod. As Tia mentioned earlier, accounts have been created for our instructional staff. And to log in, you're simply going to go to nearpod.com, which I am about to do as well, so you can see it on my screen. All right, so when you get to nearpod.com, you'll see a screen that looks like this. There's a section for students, a section for teachers, and then the administrator side is more for your district admins of the Nearpod license. So here we're going to focus on the teacher section right now, and we're going to click log in. It'll take me to the login page, and from this login page, all I have to do is log in with Google. It'll show me any Google accounts I have associated, and then I would select my PGCPS login. That's how it will know that you have that license, because you have the PGCPS email address. Now, once you log in, it's going to bring you to your home page. And this home page is set to be your library. So you'll notice at the top it says My Library. And when you log in for the first time, you may not see anything else. You may just see that search box that says My Library, and then you won't have anything down here except for this first box that says Create on Your Own. As we begin to add lessons to the library, which we'll show you how to do today, you'll have your library populated with the lessons that you have selected. So we'll talk more about this My Library section in a few moments, but I want to draw your attention over to the gray panel on the left-hand side. Over here, we have several options. First, if we wanted to join a lesson, if we were already logged in as a teacher, but maybe I want to join one of my colleagues' lessons that we've provided a code for, I could join a lesson by just entering a code in here. There's also the Nearpod lesson library, and we'll investigate that in a few moments, but that's where you can find a wealth of lessons that have already been created within Nearpod that you can use. The school library and district library, we are not currently using. As of right now, we have our license until the end of this school year. So right now, we're not using the school library or district library. And we'll see what happens in the future if those things become active. As we scroll down, we're already in our My Library section. The other thing that I wanted to point out is the Nearpod Learning Labs. Nearpod offers professional development on various topics. And so if you were interested in some of those professional development opportunities, you could click on their learning labs. And they will populate over on the right-hand side. And so you can see if you were looking for information about activating academic engagement, you could go through a presentation on that, balanced literacy, classroom management. These are all things that are available to you as the educator to kind of enhance your skills and knowledge. Additionally, on our left-hand panel, we have the reports section. So T is going to dive into that a little bit later, but after you deliver these sessions with your students, you want to go back and be able to see how did they do? How did each individual student perform? You can do that in those reports that Tia will show later. And then there's also resources, which we'll discuss at the end. Where do you go for more information? All right, as I come across the top, I wanted to point out two additional icons. The plus symbol is for creating. So if you wanted to begin to create, and we will have a session next week on advanced use of Nearpod. And during that session, you will learn about how to create your own content within the platform or with using Google Slides. The other icon that we have here is the quick launch. And that's more for if you wanted to do an activity on the fly. You don't necessarily have slides or a lesson plan, but you just want to use one of their interactive activities. You can come and use the quick launch feature. But now what I really want to focus our attention on is that Nearpod lesson library. I'm going to select that. Nearpod has over 7,000 lessons that are in here. And lessons are created by various companies like LearnZillion, Education.com. There's a host of companies that have created lessons for Nearpod. Also, there are individual teachers that in Nearpod themselves who have created lessons that are here for you as well. So there are multiple ways that you can search within this library. Over here on the left-hand side, you'll notice that we have our grade panel has changed. And so here on our grade panel now, we can search by subject area, we can search by grade level, we can search by resource type. And you'll notice that there's even some virtual reality type of lessons, some that are just for warm up, some that are skill builders. So you can decide how you want to search over here. Another way that you can search is by standard. So if I come up to the top and select the box for standard, I would go down to Maryland, and then I would select the subject that I want to look for. Then I would select the grade level that I'm targeting. And then it's going to show me several Nearpod lessons that are tied to particular standards. Now, if I go down a little more, you'll notice I have a strand section. And so here I can actually identify the particular standard that I want to find a lesson for. So you can do it by standards as well. All of that is there in ways that we can search. And then lastly, sometimes you don't know all of those different things. You just want to look for a particular topic. You're just looking to see what's available in the library. So you can come right here where in our top box, our search box, and type in the subject that you're looking for. So for my example, I'm going to use compound words. Maybe I want to do something with that with my students. Actually, I may need to change that part. Let's try that again. There we go. So here's several lessons about compound words. If I hover over, it'll give me a little snippet about what the lesson is. It'll tell me the targeted grade level, and it'll tell me who created it. So this one is by the Nearpod team. This is by an individual teacher. And this one is by Education.com. If I want to know a little bit more, I simply just click on the lesson. And it gives me a preview of what this lesson will entail. So if I click on preview, I can go through the lesson to get an idea if this is something that's going to meet the needs of my students. I can see how many slides it is. This one has 26 slides. And if I decide, you know what, I've gone through this preview and I really like this lesson, I want to use this with my students. The next step would be to come down to this blue box that says add to my library. get that green bar that says that the lesson has been added successfully. And then I can choose, you'll notice that my blue button at the bottom has now turned green and says show in my library. So I can click here, or I can always get back to my library by clicking on this house icon at the top. Either one will work. So now I'm coming back into my library, and there's the lesson. It's popped right in there for me. If I hover over the lesson, you'll notice that you see some different things that we can do with it. I can drag and reorder it. So if I have lots of things in my library and I want to place this somewhere else, I can simply drag and drop it where I want it to go. If I come to the three dots, anytime you see three dots, that usually means that there's more things that we can do. So if I select those three dots, here I could share it with one of my colleagues, maybe might be something that I found that would be useful for them. So I could share that with them as well. I could duplicate this lesson. So maybe I want to keep the original as is, but then I want to make a copy of it. I could do that as well. If you like to organize your things, you can go to add to and create folders and then put your lessons inside of folders. You'll notice that I have a folder up here that has some lessons in it. We can export the lesson as a PDF, but then it's not really interactive if we do that. This is where another place to get the reports, and then if I needed to delete the lesson. We'll come back later and talk about launching the lesson and these two options that we have here. And we've already taken a look at the preview. So now I want to go into edit mode. When I go to edit, it's going to give me the option of, do I want, because I'm editing this original copy, do I want to make a duplicate lesson, or do I want to edit the one that I've brought into my library? It's completely up to you, because when you bring it into your library, it is your version of it already. So do you need multiple versions, or do you just want to edit that exact lesson? So I'm going to choose edit the lesson. Once I'm here, now I can see all the slides that are in the lesson. Where you see these little circles, these are things from Nearpod that are either the interactive activities, or sometimes they are content, multimedia content also from Nearpod that have been inserted. The other ones that we see are slides that have probably been created either within Nearpod itself or within Google Slides or PowerPoint and then brought in. So from this standpoint, once we have it here, we can manipulate it how we see fit. So if I wanted to reorganize the slides, I could do that just by dragging and dropping them. If I decide that, you know what, I really don't need to have this slideshow option here, because that was more for the teacher about the lesson. So maybe I don't need that particular slide. I can select it and choose delete slide. And if I get a confirmation to delete it, and now that's not in my presentation anymore. If I come down and I notice, you know what, this particular activity here is talking about with your partner. And we're doing distance learning right now, so we might not be doing the partner work that I would have been doing in the classroom. I can open this up. And it's going to go into my activity. And I can simply change the text. Okay, so I can change the directions here. You'll also notice that with some of the activities, I can add instructions. I can add a little video if I needed to, or I can even add audio. So if I needed to read these directions to my students, because maybe I'm gonna make this a self-paced lesson, I could add the audio recorder and simply click on a microphone and then record. Right. After I've made any edits to the slide, I want to make sure I click save. And then I'm right back into my lesson that I have here. Now, one other thing we wanted to point out while we're here in this lesson is that there is the ability to add additional content to this already existing presentation, this already existing lesson that you have. So if I click here where it says add slide, I have three options. One is to add content. So in Nearpod, content, they're referring to more multimedia. So if I click here, you'll see that there's lots of options and things that I could add in to my existing lesson. If I chose that, oh, you know what, I really would like to add additional video that I found that I thought would work great for my students, I can click here on video. And then I could type in the name of the video, or I can even search from within here. Okay, so I know that I've already watched this ahead of time, and I know that this was a good video for my students. So then I can select it and bring it in. And so it pops in right down there at the bottom. But again, I can drag and drop and reorder it wherever I feel like it should go. That's adding content. Web content would be simply adding a website URL that maybe you want the students to go visit. You can do that as well. And then adding activities. So this is where you saw several of the things that Tia did in the student experience earlier. This is where you were able to do that fill in the blank or that poll question. All of those things are under add activity. So I'm not going to go through all of these and how to add different activities. Again, we do have an advanced session that's going to really dig into the creation part of Nearpod and creating. Today, we're focused on just getting in, finding lessons, and how to use those lessons that we find, and maybe tweaking them just a little bit to meet our needs. So if I did need to add an activity, maybe I want to add one activity to this, I'll use the one that Tia did earlier, fill in the blank, just to show you how that would work. Here, I would come in and I can type in whatever sentence I have or paragraph that I want to do, maybe if it's a closed reading activity, or I can paste it in. So I have a couple sentences already ready, and I'm going to paste them in. Once you have them here, over here on the left-hand side, this is just changing your background color. How do you want it to look for your students? I'm going to leave it on that gray because I like the contrast. And then the next step, you should see, missing, there it is, my next button. If I click on next, I have to identify the words that I wanted to pull out. So maybe I'm pulling out my compound, where I'm doing compound words. I'm going to pull out my compound words. And then I'm done. And so I simply click done. I've created my closed activity. When it comes down here to the bottom, if I'm not sure and I need to see it again, I can always click on preview to see my lesson. Okay, and so here it is with my drag and drop words down here at the bottom. Okay, so I'm looking at the student preview right now. And I can click on the X to close it out. So at any time, whenever I'm going through my lesson, if I want to preview the whole thing, I still have that option where I can just click on preview and go through it and see it as a student would see it when I give it to them. When I think I'm done with my lesson, I would click save and exit. And while that is going on, I want to make sure I see my colleagues are answering the questions. Thank you that we have on the side. Let's see if there was any questions about finding the lessons.
Monica, this is Kim. Just to quickly unmute, a couple people have already asked some common differences between Pear Deck and Nearpod.
Okay, so they are very similar in the interactivity. I would say some of the differences are probably some of the activities that are available in Nearpod may not be available in Pear Deck. I'm trying to think of which ones offhand. I know some of the content that you can add in, like the PhET simulations, the virtual reality, those things are things that are different in Nearpod than in Pear Deck. However, also one of the big differences is that the fact that Nearpod has all the lessons already in here. Like I said, they already have 7,000 lessons that have been loaded in here. So you can take bits and pieces of them and then add your own content as well. Pear Deck has the templates that you can work for your interactivity, but all of the lesson content is mainly what you create.
Another question I'm getting is about audio, and I honestly can't remember about audio being able to.
Question.
Can audio files be transferred over to the Nearpod presentation? So if you recorded audio outside of Nearpod, I don't remember.
I believe you can add in, let me jump back into edit mode. Okay. And I believe when I'm here in add slide, it might be under add content, I think. Yes, audio, you can add in audio to your slides. So you have to have the audio file already, so you're not creating it here within Nearpod, like that one example that I showed. In case you would just be bringing over your audio file. And then also with that, even if you had a small video file like that you made on Screencastify or some other tool, you could bring that in as well. Hope that helped. All right, so I'm going to jump back out.
And again, just to clarify, your students would join the same way that Tia had you join with the code. It does appear in Clever, so students could connect that way, but they still have to put in the code. You could also share directly to Classroom, but they might be prompted. I think the link would include the code in Classroom, but I'm not sure. So just to clarify about how students would join.
Yes, and I was going to show the classroom, how you can do the classroom piece in a second. I did see, yes, the vocabulary part, there is a bit for that. You only get 3 vocabulary videos because that is a separate subscription. But they have a connection with Nearpod and they allow you to use up to 3 videos from vocabulary. And then I saw a question about students and audio responses, and I believe that there is on certain questions, and again, I'm not sure if this lesson has one. I want to say when they're open-ended questions, those here. Let's see this one. There is an option, and it's a new option, so I think it may even be in beta, yes, to enable student audio recordings. So you would turn that feature on, and then they could record their answer as opposed to typing it. So that will answer that question as well. All right, so now I'm going to talk about launching the lesson. We found our lesson, we made a couple modifications to our lesson, and now we're ready to share our lesson with our students. Let me get back to that library page. When we're ready to share our lesson with our students, we come back to the My Library, we find our lesson, and I mentioned we have 2 options here. And basically these 2 options are synchronous and asynchronous. So when I say synchronous, that's that live lesson. I want the students to move through the lesson with me. I am guiding them through each part of the lesson. I can do that in a virtual environment, just like we did here with you today as the student experience. I may be using Meet or Zoom and have that up, but then I have my students go to the other tab for the Nearpod lesson, and they're just listening to me through the video conference tool, but they're going through each point in the Nearpod lesson as I'm speaking. So that would be the live lesson. The student-paced lesson is that I want to give my students the opportunity to go through this lesson at their own time, and let them walk through this lesson whenever they can during their day. So if I'm going to do the live lesson, I'll show that one first. Here I'll select live. Right, and this is the code that students would use to join the lesson. Now, I have a couple options on how I give the students this code. I could have my students go to joinnearpod.com, or honestly, they could even just go to nearpod.com. The way that I most likely would use is the Google Classroom connection. So I could click here and say Google Classroom. It will bring up for you to choose your class, so you can pick from the classes that you have and where you want to put that particular lesson. Then you select how do you want to assign this particular live lesson. Is it an announcement? Is it an assignment? Is it a material? You choose how you want that to come into your classroom. So maybe I'm going to say that this is an assignment or even an announcement. All right, and click on go. And then it's going to take me to my screen to go ahead and put in my post. I'll see. All right, and then I would have this here. Just like we would in a normal classroom, I can assign it for just Miss Jenkins' class, or I can assign it to multiple classes. I could have it for just a few students. Actually, this class doesn't have that many students. It's my practice class. But if I had all my students in, I could select particular students and only assign it to them. And then I can click on post, and it will automatically go into Classroom for the class that I have designated. It will provide the link for the students so that they just need to click that link to then join the Nearpod session. So that's one way. Again, if I'm doing it live virtually with the students, I might put in chat like we did earlier, go to join PD, join Nearpod, and then give them the code and let them put that in. But you have a couple options there. Once I have the lesson live and everyone's in, Tia kind of showed you before, but you're just guiding them through. You're taking them through by clicking on the arrows. And then this is the teacher side. So we've seen that student side where they're answering the poll and the results come in here for you as the teacher. So you can see the feedback. You can choose to hide student names or show student names. Obviously, if we're doing this live and on Nearpod, on Zoom or Meet, we probably want to hide our student names, but you can go through the different parts of your lesson. I'm going to come out of that, and that's the live lesson. And now I'm going to talk to you about the student paced. So here, if I click student paced option, it automatically is going to give me 29 days for how long the students can access this lesson. So it tells me how long this link will be valid and this code will be valid for the students. I can adjust that if I want, and that's by clicking on the calendar. So if I decide that I want to give extended time, I can do that. Maybe I'm giving them until the end of the school year to make sure that they have it done however you decide. Okay? So you can apply it that way. And then the same thing holds true on how you give them the information. If I wanted to just give them a link to it, I can do that here. So I could post the link somewhere, but I could also use that Google Classroom option. The same way that I showed you earlier, it would work similar here. It's just that it's now in self-paced mode. And so if I say self-paced mode, I'm going to copy this here just to show you that might look. I'm going to just open up an incognito window so that you can see what a student, when they paste that link in, it automatically takes them to the lesson. They're asked to put in their name. I'm going to use Tia and select join session. And then they go through the lesson on their own. So the teacher is not guiding them now. Now it is them moving through the lesson at their own pace and responding to those questions. So this is that self-paced mode. I'm going to pause for a moment before we turn it back over to Tia to talk about reports, to see if there are any questions about self-paced mode or delivering the lesson in live mode. Okay, we don't know at this point about next year. There's unanswered questions as far as everything goes, but I do know that you can have a free access to Nearpod as well. Some of the features are premium, and I believe we'll show that at the end. So some of the things that we discussed are premium features, but a lot of them are included in the basic. A lot of the lessons are there in the basic. A lot of the options are there. So you would still have those things and access to that. One of the biggest things I think is the difference between the basic version and the premium is the space that's allowed. You're only given a certain amount of space on the basic version, storage space in your My Library, and you have a lot more in the premium.
So speaking of space, the question keeps coming up about narrating lessons. Narration or audio and video files take up a lot of space. And as Monica mentioned before, the audio has to be recorded outside of Nearpod or whatever tool you're using and then add it into your slide. But you don't want to do it a lot because it's going to take up a lot of space. So kind of keep that in mind as well.
Okay, so at this point, I notice our time is dwindling down and we want to show you the reports. So I am going to switch it over to Tia. We're kind of doing our tag team again.
Virtual high five, Monica.
And she is going to walk us through what happens with all this data, where is it going, and showing us how we can go back and access those reports.
Absolutely. And while we switch over, just a reminder that, again, we have those two types of experiences that we can do with the students, right? We can have the synchronous experience. So I'm teaching, I'm driving, the students are interacting. And while they're interacting, like I showed you earlier, I can see real-time feedback and real-time results. Or if I happen to maybe want to do the asynchronous, where I do the self-paced and my students are walking through at their own pace. I apologize for my phone. If the students are walking through at their own pace, then I can go back and look at the reports, right? Because they may be doing it at certain times. And if I look at it at 1 minute, I might only see 5 active students versus another. So when you're in Nearpod, there's 2 ways to get to the reports. If I know the specific lesson that I worked on, like Monica was showing us earlier, I can come and click those 3 dots and get to reports for that specific lesson. I can also, on the left-hand side, come down in this menu option and select reports here. But since I know it was specifically the new Nearpod student experience, I'm going to click the 3 dots and go to reports from here. So Nearpod's going to pull up the reports, and when I click on it, you're going to see 4 sessions here, okay? And notice there's a difference in the number. So I can run this session multiple times, and I saw a question earlier that Kim answered about the code. Each of these times that I ran the session, the code was different. So when I present it and run it once, and then I stop and run it again, it will actually give me a different code. But this is the session that I want to examine because it was the one most of you were in. When I go to the reports, it's going to give me the different activity types that I have access to in Nearpod overall, and show me, to start with, the general participation, right? So out of everyone who was in Nearpod, out of all of those of you who participated, it will show me how many of you actually participated in those activities. Then I can drill down to the specific activities that we did in this session. Now, remember, we didn't do a quiz, so I'm going to go straight to my poll. And if I had multiple polls, they would be listed here, but I only had one poll question. And I can get a listing here of who answered that poll question and even who didn't answer, so I can get a gauge. I'm given a graph option as well, so I can get an overall sense and then look more specifically. We did have a draw it question, so I just want to show you how that looks. If I click on draw it, then I can see the specific drawings that you all did. And when I click on one in particular that has drawings on it, I can get a more magnified view of what Agnes selected as the tool that her students use. Now, we didn't use matching pairs or any of the other options here, but we did use collaborate. Okay, and when I select collaborate, because it is, in a sense, a live kind of virtual space to share ideas, I can look at it in 2 options. I can look at it in view only, which would just let me see what everybody selected, and then if I wanted to add to it, I can. Or if I go back here and select editable, I can have the option to go back and approve any comments, which actually popped up for me the first time I launched the activity with you all. You just didn't see it. And I said no, because I wanted your feedback to come in real time. But in this case, I can say yes. And then I can go through, and if I wanted to, I can take the opportunity here to approve what's written before it's posted. Okay. So I can go back and look at that. In the reports, I can also download the report as well. So if I wanted to download, for example, the poll option, I can download either the session view or the student view. I'm going to select the session view. I can download to my local drive, which is my computer, or my Google Drive, which is nice, so I can share it in Drive. But I'll just go ahead and download it to my local drive. And while it's doing that, there was another option there for me to share the information. So maybe I'm working with another teacher and I want them to see how the students did. So I can share that with Kim or Monica or another teacher if I wanted to. And depending on which view you select will depend upon the report. So I chose the class view, right? The overall view. So I can see here the student list, the participation, and then it will give me the information from those reports, okay? So I can drill down even further. So this is really great to be able to go back and to get some of that additional information once my students have finished their session, whether it's synchronously or asynchronously, okay? So just a few things to share because we have about 1 minute left. So I know we're jam-packed in this session and I hope you found it helpful because many of you said you have not used Nearpod before. Our recording from our sessions as well as a presentation will be posted on the remote teaching website, so you'll be able to get back to those in a few days. We do have some tips for home based learning, and more straight from Nearpod. And they have some really good recommendations in there on how to use Nearpod to teach at a distance. Nearpod also offers daily live webinars. So what a great way for you to tap in and hear straight from the experts about their tools. And then they also have some recorded and self-paced features for you to explore as well. So you will be able to go back and look at this presentation. Now, I know a lot of you asked questions about the premium account, and Kim, in her most awesome fashion, as always, answered those questions. But we just want to remind you that through the closure, we do have premium accounts, and here are some of those features that are probably going to be of most importance to you in your premium account and using them. So just go back and take a look at this. Your students do have the ability to take notes on some of those slides and lessons in Nearpod. You have access, as Monica mentioned, to that huge library of lessons already made, okay? And content from reading to social studies, science, health, you name it. You can do the student-paced versions, student-paced lessons, excuse me, in Nearpod, and you can get reports on individual students as well as your entire class. And then the most important, currently, you have up to 20 gigabytes of storage space. So you may want to begin thinking about how you can go through and be able to kind of work through some of those lessons that you make in Nearpod. Monica, Kim, am I missing anything else for the good of the order? I want to make sure I capture it before we finish today's session.
No, I think that's it. I think really looking at those resources that we have
Yes.
for you, Nearpod has done a great job of providing resources to all teachers during this time. So I would look at some of those, and then in addition, review the presentation that we have for you as well, and try it out. Just start slow, find a lesson that works for you, and try and use it with your students, or try the self-paced mode and let them try and use it.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing is just to try it.
And maybe even too, Monica, send it to a colleague, right? Like I sent you mine. I was like, can you do this for me? So that's another great way to kind of get your feet comfortable before diving in.
Yes, you could always have a friend go through your lesson first and see, like, does this work for you? Or if you have children at home, have them go through it as well and see if it
Yes.
works. Okay.
Well, if there aren't any immediate questions, we are going to conclude our session for today. Again, you'll be able to find all of the resources on the remote teaching website on the Connecting with Students tab, and you'll find a page and section just for Nearpod. On behalf of Monica, Kim, myself, all the members in T3, thank you for what you do and for distance learning, and we hope that you're able to find this tool beneficial in engaging the students with your lessons and making them interactive. Have a great afternoon, stay safe, and be kind to yourself and others.